Good afternoon, everyone. It helps if I turn the microphone on. Welcome to the February 23rd meeting of the Comox Valley Sewage Commission. And I'd like to recognize that our meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. We're glad everybody's able to join in today. And I'd like to acknowledge Director Hamir, who's also on the line. Do we have Major Stevens? Okay, so we'll start off with the management report, the Sewage Commission Management Report dated February 21st for receipt.
Move receipt.
Moved by Director Grant, a seconder?
Second.
Seconded Director Minions. Any questions or discussion? Whoops. Director Swift, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just curious about number 9, which talks about a third-party professional oversight for major projects. And I'm wondering where that fits in, where we're at with that. Was that part of this value engineering that we're going to be hearing about in the next item?
Mr. Chair, I can answer that question for the commission members, and the policy is a work in progress that we'll be bringing back after consultation with the advisory, but I can assure you that it is put into place, especially with respect to this project where we have engaged value planning as a means for evaluating the proposal, and that will be discussed in the presentation with respect to the sewage conveyance questions today.
Okay, so it's underway.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or discussion? I have one myself. I'm wondering if we could get any update on the Sandy Dump project. I believe Sewage Commission members have had quite a bit of mail from local residents in the last little while concerned about the timing of that initiative.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'll refer that question to Chris LaRose.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this one, so as a reminder, this one was directed back to staff to work with municipal staff to develop some options or assess some options for siting of the station at some point within the municipal collection systems. So the model that's being kind of further explored is CVRD ownership and operation of the facility, but then locating within the municipality to take advantage of the collection system. So there hasn't been a lot of progress since the last time we spoke, but we do have it as a discussion item on our next advisory meeting to talk about how to work together to identify options for siting of it within the municipal collection systems.
Thanks. And just in terms of timing, do you have any sense that we might be looking at some type of operation by this summer, or is that overly optimistic?
Unfortunately, I think that is overly optimistic. I don't expect that we will have a solution in place for this summer.
And that's primarily because of the complications of getting an actual site and actually getting it operational.
Yeah, I would expect that it could be roughly a 2 or 3 month process to narrow down an option for siting. Working closely with the municipal staff, but then subsequent to that, we would have to, every site will present different challenges and constraints. So it's that design process, and then subsequent construction, could not happen in parallel with that work with the municipalities. So. Yeah, I think we're looking at at least 6 or 8 months, probably closer to eight months before we could even optimistically have such a system in place.
Thanks very much. Seeing no further questions or comments, we'll ask if anybody objects to receipt of the management report. And seeing none, we'll declare that received. We'll move on to the Comox Valley Sewage Management Advisory Committee minutes.
Move receipt.
Moved by Director Grant.
Second.
Seconded by Director Cole Hamilton. Questions or discussion? Any objection to receipt? Seeing none, that is declared received. And the minutes of the Sewage Management Advisory Commission held February 11th.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved by Director Grant, seconded by Director Cole-Hamilton. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, that is declared received. And we'll move on to item number 2, the sewage system conveyance project implementation decisions, and the report dated February 19th.
Move receipt.
Second.
Moved by Director Grant, seconded by Director Cole-Hamilton, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Commissioners, and for your consideration today of what is a monumental decision for you to undertake or consider. This is to determine this preferred sewage conveyance option for the sewage system after extensive work through a liquid waste management plan, value engineering, assessment and development of options with our staff and key stakeholders, the municipal staff members as well. A number of staff will help, that were part of the project team, will help present this today for you. We will look at different aspects as to how we've arrived at this recommendation, the approval process for borrowing and the financial strategy, as well as communications and other things. As each member of staff completes their presentation, you may ask urgent questions of them then, but I suggest that perhaps keeping the questions and debate until afterwards, as your questions may be answered by others as they come along. The intention today is to provide you with a good fulsome time, 2 hours for this meeting, to enable you to ask your questions and have confidence in the recommendations that have been provided for you. I will hand it over to Chris LaRose, who will start with the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Russell. Through the chair. Hello again, everyone. So as Russell highlighted, this report and the presentation is the culmination of a lengthy and very thorough planning process to determine the best solution for resolving the serious environmental risk posed by the scarcely covered force main along Willamore Bluffs. And then while we're at it, selecting the best long-term solution for getting the wastewater from our core urban areas to the treatment plant. So the liquid waste management planning process was initiated by the commission almost exactly 3 years ago. And it was chosen to ensure that the chosen preferred solution had as robust an assessment and public engagement process as possible before proceeding with implementation. And the process has followed through. There should be strong confidence in the outcome because of how all the key stakeholders have been engaged through formation of the technical and public advisory committees, how the process has thoroughly assessed every possible option, and finally, because of the strength of the public engagement program that was implemented to feed community concerns and priorities back into the process and help guide it. Next slide, please. So because of the complexity of the topics and the importance, you'll be getting a team delivery of the presentation as Russell mentioned. And we will take a brief pause at the end of each person's component to take any burning questions, and then be ready to support a more fulsome discussion at the end of the presentation. So the first piece is I'll walk very briefly through an update on the liquid waste management planning process and the TACPAK evaluation of the options. And then Christiane will take us through a summary of the public engagement that was done throughout the 3-year process. And then I'll come back and provide an assessment or a description of the assessment and the milestones that have happened since the TACPAK met at the end of October last year. And then describe the preferred conveyance solution. And then Charlie will take over and he'll provide an update on the anticipated project cost, so the updated cost estimate, and the anticipated timeline for implementation of the project should you decide to support the motion. And then Mariah will walk you through the in-depth financial analysis done in-house and in collaboration with the municipal CFOs. And then finally, James will walk us through the case for and details around the recommended funding authorization mechanism. Next slide, please. So this graph or this flow chart just summarizes the liquid waste management planning process. So the LWMP, just as a very brief reminder, had 3 key components, with the most significant of which, and the driver for the process, was obviously the conveyance. So with the primary goal of decommissioning the Wilmar Bluff section of force main. But we were also looking at the treatment level, so the desired treatment level for the treatment plant to set and guide our upgrades to the facility over the coming decades. And then finally, any opportunities or assessing opportunities for further exploitation of resource recovery options in our operations. So further to the process followed to date. So in just a little bit more detail. So the first step was pulling together all the key stakeholders into the technical and public advisory committees. And so these included environmental stewardship, the business sector through the Business Improvement Associations, the Comox Valley Chamber of Commerce. We had local government participation on both bodies, the Shellfish Growers Association, Underwater Harvesters Association, and we also put the call out for public representatives from each of the communities, both the participant communities, Courtenay and Comox, but also the impacted electoral area B, where the majority of the infrastructure is located. So then we worked with the TAC and the PAC, the Technical and Public Advisory, to establish goals and weighting for the evaluation process. So this was in advance of really considering the options. And then we cast the net far and wide to ensure that all options for conveyance and treatment and resource recovery were identified. And then we worked in collaboration with the TAC and the PAC and the expert engineering support to assess every option. And then we shortlisted options for each of those components for more detailed assessment, significantly more detailed assessment than what was done for the long list. And then finally, which was what happened for conveyance at the end of last year, we applied the goals and evaluation criteria and the weighting that was developed at the beginning of the process to rank the shortlisted conveyance options. So the treatment and resource recovery decision was brought forward to the Commission and supported in early December of last year. And today in front of you is the final decision on the preferred conveyance solution. So just very briefly looking farther down the graph. So those pieces form the basis, the most important pieces of the stage 1 and 2 report. Once that is complete, a little bit later this year, that plan will be submitted to the province. We're estimating October of this year. And the province says 6 to 12 months for review. We've spoken with other jurisdictions and they say it's 12 months minimum. So we've assumed a 12-month review period here. So submitted October 2021, that plan would come back roughly the same time the following year. In parallel with that, we will be developing the stage 3 plan, which just really puts the details into how the objectives of the plan will be implemented. And then that will be submitted towards the end of next year, end of 2022, and again, take another year at least for review. Provincial review complete, we would have an adopted plan and then move to implementation, likely in 2024. So some of you will remember seeing this graphic early on in the process. And at that point, we were signaling the likely intent to break out the conveyance from the process in terms of not relying on the LWMP for the required authorization, just to get us to the preferred solution and then break it out. And our thinking is very much remains the same, and it's supported by the motion on your staff report. And that's just really based on the significant schedule delay of leaving it in the liquid waste management plan. As I flagged on the top right there, we're looking at a 2 to 3 year delay to implementation of a solution to the Wilmar Bluff section of force main if we relied on the liquid waste management plan for authorization of the required borrowing. So what we're recommending today is that the conveyance be broken out and that the authorization for that borrowing be obtained through AAP. And that's something that James will get into a greater detail later in the presentation. And so this should allow us to have that project largely complete around or just after the time that we would otherwise be getting approval from the province. Hence that 2 to 3 year delay. So next slide, please. So just zeroing in on the TACPAK conveyance evaluation process. So at their October 27th meeting last year, after meeting a total of 11 times, the TACPAK concluded their evaluation of the conveyance options 1, 2, and 3. So not surprisingly, given how similar options 2 and 3 were, which both involved overland force main with the use of tunneling to cut through rather than go over the heights of land, and only differing in that option 3 would deliver that in 2 phases, option 2 in a single phase. So not surprisingly, those 2 options were tied, ended up being tied in the TACPAK evaluation, with option 1 a distant third. So as shown on the slide here, the Technical and Public Advisory Committees chose to recommend elimination of option 1 just based on that ranking, and then provided some feedback to staff and the Sewage Commission about factors that they felt should be considered in making that decision. So this feedback is detailed in Appendix A to this staff report, but at a high level, the commission wanted to point, sorry, the committees wanted to point out that that really the top priority was decommissioning the Wilmer Bluffs force main as soon as possible. They felt that option 3, allowed maximal use of the existing asset, and that the phased approach allowed for more flexibility in the future in terms of what was delivered, but that phasing introduced unknown future risks that should also be considered. They highlighted the need for careful negotiation and process to obtain the statutory right-of-ways required for the directional drilled sections of pipe. And that consideration be given to the fact that the weighting for the evaluation was developed long before the COVID-19 pandemic came along, and that there's a prospect of shifting community priorities. So now, before I pass you over to Christiane to summarize for us the results of the public engagement process that ran in parallel with the Technical and Public Advisory Committee process, are there any burning questions on this part of the process before we move on? I'd be happy to answer them.
Director Grant?
Chris, I might be jumping the gun here a little bit, but I'm looking at your option 1 consideration for the route, and I guess I'm wondering if we go along Comox Avenue down Ellis, how long will that process take? And I'm concerned about shutting down our main street for our businesses and how long that would take. If it's a weekend, it's one thing. If it's several weeks or months, then I don't think that option could actually work for us. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
Sure. Yeah, I think I don't mind answering that now, even though we'll get to a more detailed map of the preferred solution, because the same question arises for either one. So I think the impact to any given block, would be on the time scale of months for sure. Potentially 2 or 3 months for a particular block, assuming we're able to move through fairly quickly, and that also depends on the kind of the extent of the scope of work. Obviously just a cut and cover, repairing a single lane of asphalt would have a significantly different time frame than if the project, if there's synergies that are identified through the collaboration with the town for a broader replacement in terms of sidewalks and bike lanes, that type of thing. You could expect the time frame to be longer for a larger scope. Yeah, does that answer your question, Director?
Yeah, it seems like an awful long time to keep our street shut down for businesses. So it's something I think our council is really going to want to wrestle with. I understand that going down Rodello and down to Beaufort might be another option. So I think we're going to want to really think that through.
Okay, and we're certainly committed to working very closely with your staff and supporting your council's deliberation to nail down that alignment. Because we're fortunate in that section to have an alternate route. Both if Comox Avenue is selected as the preferred alignment, then Beaufort does provide an alternate route for traffic, and vice versa. If Beaufort is chosen, then Comox provides an alternate for that. So like I said, we're committed to working very closely with town staff and council to support that decision.
And as you say, you'll get into that in further detail later on, will you?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. We have a question from Director Swift.
Thanks. Again, Chris, I don't know if this is the place to ask this question. I'm just curious, given what we've discovered about the pipes in the estuary, is that the same type of material that's used in the pipes along Willamar Bluffs?
Yes, it's slightly different, but similar type of material. And actually, I will get into greater detail on that on a subsequent slide after Christiane provides the summary. So
we'll just leave it.
Sounds good.
All right, I don't see any more right now, so feel free to move on to the next section, please.
Okay, great. So that's it for me. So I'll pass you over to Christiane to describe the public engagement process.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm pleased to summarize for you our 6-week engagement for the Shortlist Consultation, which occurred through September to mid-October of last year. And during this time, we had 3 in-person open houses in Comox and Courtenay, with 1 webinar and over 85 attendees to those events. And the intent there was to answer questions about the options under consideration and to encourage residents to complete the online survey, which was the central tool that we used to collect feedback for this consultation. We had over 300 completed surveys that were submitted, with the majority of respondents residing in Comox and a fairly even split between Area B and Courtenay residents. We asked respondents from the survey not to rank or choose their preferred option, but they were instead asked to provide feedback and rank the benefits and risk for each route under consideration. And the reason for that was this format allowed us to gather feedback in a meaningful way and to set reasonable expectations for the consultation, understanding that a project that's this complex would rely very heavily on technical analysis. So beyond participating in the ranking exercise for the survey, about 16% of participants provided an additional comment to us, and most of those were fairly wide-ranging, but there's 2 clusters worth flagging that I'll highlight for you here. The first being concern about pursuing option 3 because it delayed the removal of the foreshore pipe in the estuary. And the second being concerns around costs, and in particular, if the risk of rising construction costs in 20 years would outweigh the benefit of constructing the project in 2 phases. Otherwise, I will say the comments were pretty specific to differing neighborhood concerns, protection of certain trees, or implementing a walkway or bike lane. So the project team can use these type of neighborhood concerns and consider them in the planning for the next phase of public engagement, which will occur pre-construction in 2022. And through our conversations with the community, both online and one-on-one with project team members, we did identify the need to respond to concerns about groundwater for Area B residents. And we held a webinar in November following this consultation with recordings of this session and our responses to those questions posted to our project page. And you can still find those at Connect CVRD. And we found through this experience that the webinars were actually a really well-received tool in the community, and it's been an excellent way for us to collect and respond to questions and concerns from the community in a transparent way. And we'll be following up with this particular group of Area B residents with another online meeting on March 4th. and we'll provide an update on this process as well as the next steps for tunneling alignment and well monitoring program. So I'll just mention here before I take any questions that a full analysis of these results are available as part of Appendix D in your staff report. And I'm happy to answer any questions now that you might have for me.
Thank you, Christiane. Any questions related to public engagement? Director Grant?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Christina. That you guys have done a pretty good job of getting the news out. But when I look and I see we had 187 respondents in Comox and we've got 15,000 people, I think if you were to walk up and down the streets of Comox and ask everybody what's going on with sewer, you wouldn't get very many people that actually know what we're doing and where this is going. And of course, it'll, as soon as you start digging the streets up, that's when they all start coming out and asking the questions. So my question is I'm sure there is one, is there a long range plan to really get the people informed as to what we're doing? And is that up to Comox to do, or would that be part of this plan? And, we have some really significant cost increases coming in our community, and this is but another one. And, people are not going to respond well to all the increases that we have coming up. And I think the only way to really mitigate that is to get well ahead of the process with a communication plan. So I'm just wondering if you have that mapped out, or that's something Comox should be doing.
Well, this is definitely not the end of consultation for the community. So it is the final stage of consultation for the liquid waste management plan prior to our submission to the province. But there will be another stage of consultation in 2022, and we're working on the planning for that now. And that's that important pre-construction phase where we would be connecting with business owners and in Comox residents in particular who are going to be impacted by that construction. But I also would like to provide the reassurance that we did actually reach out directly to over 2,000 Comox residents with a direct letter in the mail, including route maps for all of the shortlisted options under consideration. So we had 300 respondents to the survey who chose to participate in the survey, but there were over 2,000 informed via direct mail, plus all the advertising that was done as well. So our reach was broader than just what the survey reflects, but it is it's difficult to get residents to respond specifically to a survey. This was a very technically complex issue. Sometimes sewer is hard to get interested in, I guess, until, as you say, there's a risk of construction and the road being ripped up. So we expect that we'll have more participants during that next stage of consultation pre-construction, but we have set the tone for informing about this project.
Yeah, that's good. I just wanted to make sure that we had something going on. I know I saw your form. It came to our house and I pulled it out of the recycle bin. So it's a little early for people to be getting their heads around it, but I just want to make sure that people aren't surprised by what happens and that we're getting the message out ahead of the game.
Thank you, Director Hamir.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to say thank you to Christiane and the whole communications team for making the extra effort to connect with Area B residents. And I'm wondering, Christiane, would you be able to forward me an invite if I could participate on the March 4th event? And hopefully my schedule allows it. I would like to hear just how people are absorbing some of the information that you've given them now.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments related to public engagement? Seeing none, Christiane, feel free to move along.
Actually, I'll pick it up from here. Thank you, Christiane. That was really great. Yeah. Hello again, everyone. So what I'll do now with the next 3 slides is to summarize what's been done since the advisory committees completed their evaluation in October. And that's just to inform the work that's been done to inform and support the recommendation that's in front of you today. So a major milestone that's occurred since is the finalization of the community benefit agreement between the CVRD and the KFN. So this is the culmination of several years of effort on the part of the KFN Chief and Council, the CVRD Sewage Commission, and staff from both organizations. In a nutshell, the agreement provides acknowledgement and compensation to the KFN for past and future impacts from sewage infrastructure to KFN IR1, and prior to finalization of the agreement, a commitment had been made by the Commission to not make a decision on the sewer conveyance, the preferred sewer conveyance option, until that agreement was finalized. So with it being finalized on December 18th, it now frees up the Commission to move forward with this decision. The second piece was the value engineering process. So we had brought a recommendation or motion to the Commission on November 17th last year, recommending that staff be directed to undertake a value engineering process. And kind of a quirk of the COVID-19 pandemic was that the provider who had so well assisted us on the Comox Valley Water Treatment Project with the value engineering for that project, they had switched their kind of operations to entirely virtual, rather than bringing all the experts to locally and setting up in a hotel room near the project site. They now do it via Microsoft Teams. So they've adjusted as everybody else, but as a side effect is that they did have a week available in early December, so much quicker than we had could even have hoped for, which is great because it turned out they had some fairly significant, they reached some fairly significant conclusions, which were in part still digesting, but there were several key pieces that rose out of that, including some new information about the risks associated, the costs and risks associated with the continued use of the existing pipe. So option 3 was that phased overland approach that would have seen the pipe replaced from Marina Park to the plant, including a section of tunneling underneath Lazo Hill, and then a tie into the existing pipe there, and then continuing to use the existing pipe from the Courtney Pump Station to Marina Park. But what they highlighted was that, so the team included an expert in this type of concrete reinforced pipe, and there was a number of key relevant conclusions. One is that in his opinion, this type of pipe is not commonly used in a sewer application, more commonly used on water, just given the added corrosive nature of the wastewater and the propensity of that type of pipe, which is reinforced with wire, as opposed to the, so when Director Swift asked the question earlier about is it the same type of pipe, the pipe along Willamar Bluffs and the pipe between the Courtney Pump Station and Marina Park are both steel reinforced concrete pipe, but they differ fairly significantly in that reinforcement. The section from Marina Park downstream towards the plant is reinforced with steel bars around the outside, and the section from the Courtney Pump Station to Marina Park is reinforced with wires. And the wires are much smaller in cross section, and they're therefore a lot more susceptible to corrosion, which is why he concluded is why it's not typically used in a sewer situation. So that was concerning. The second piece was that in his experience, and he provided a number of references, this type of pipe is more prone to catastrophic failure rather than leakage. And that's because it's due to that ease of corrosion that the wires are prone to. So if there is a bit of a failure of the pipe, the wastewater leaks through and corrodes a number of those wires, leading to a larger failure instead of just a trickle leak. Also very concerning, given that this is our only pipe for conveying almost all of Courtney wastewater to the plant. And then he concluded also that if he was to be comfortable to continue to use the pipe, he recommended about between $3 and $4 million worth of additional due diligence. Some of it in kind of near-term condition assessment, but other including a major item, $2 million for a real-time leak detection system, and then a restoration of the corrosion protection system, which, through subsequent analysis, doesn't look like a practical solution. So, and all of that, at the end of the day, if you do the additional due diligence, you would still have an aging pipe that had the potential of failure. So given the fact that prior to this information being known, option 2 and 3 were tied in the evaluation by the TACPAK, this is the single biggest factor that pushed us away from considering recommending option 3 and towards option 2. Another significant piece was a seismic assessment that was done. So this is separate from the value engineering process, but done by WSP and set in motion last fall. So a seismic assessment of both pump stations. And so this came back in mid-January, and with a conclusion that based on a borehole that was done next to the existing Courtney pump station, that station would be prone to liquefaction or the forces of liquefaction should we see a major earthquake in the area, which could see the station move several meters towards the river and down, which would obviously bode very poorly for the connections of the pipe into and out of that station. So that's pushed us to include a full replacement of the Courtney pump station in the project scope. And the next one is a flood assessment. So this was completed for both stations, and it concluded that the Courtney pump station should be elevated by between 1.5 and 2 meters higher than it currently is. So if we had planned to continue to use that station, so retrofit it rather than rebuild, then we might have been able to put a berm around it, but at significant cost. So this was another factor that pushed us to rebuilding. And then also when we rebuild, we'll do so at that higher elevation. And lastly, we've initiated the Area B well inventory. So the area of land under which the horizontal directional drilled section would run under Lazo Hill will need to thread its way through a number of rural wells. And I'll show that to you on the next slide here. Lisa, can you move forward one slide? Thank you. So, so the purpose of this assessment and inventory is twofold. The first one is just precisely nailing down the location and depth of each of the wells so that they can be entered into a 3D model to inform the selection of a future route through this area. And then the other important point is to establish so once that inventory is complete, then we would work with a handful of property owners within this swath of land that's identified by the orange polygon as being over top of a possible route through HDD. Would be to identify a handful of property owners willing to cooperate on installation of monitoring equipment to allow us to monitor groundwater levels and quality to establish a baseline. And we're intent on getting that data collection started as soon as possible, so we have as robust or lengthy data set as possible before construction. And then that monitoring would stay in place, at least some of it, during construction to monitor for construction impacts, and then some even post-construction to monitor post-construction as well. So we just want to acknowledge the significant concern of local residents in the area. We've as Director Hamir referenced, we do have a separate consultative process underway to meet directly with the residents in the area to understand their concerns, to be able to respond to them and adjust our approach as necessary. So we met with them in early November for a virtual open house that was well attended and seemed to be well received. And we have another virtual open house scheduled for early March, where we will check in again with the residents and provide an update on the project and continue to listen to and address their concerns. And then once we've got our engineers for the project on board a little bit later this year, we would then be reaching out or finalizing the pipeline alignment, and then reaching out to the property owners that are directly above that to start negotiating statutory right-of-ways with them for installation of the pipe. Next slide, please. So yeah, in front of you today is a recommendation to select option 2, so the overland tunnel option, to delivered in one phase as the preferred conveyance solution. So just walking through from west to east as a detailed description of this option. So we're looking at replacement of the Courtney pump station, installation of a new force main along Dyke Road or Comox Road between the Courtney pump station and Comox Hill, which is on the at the east end of the KFN IR1. And so that installation would involve pre-digging of the force main alignment through KFN IR1. And this is following up on a commitment made through the CVA and the negotiation process as a way to minimize impacts to sensitive archaeological areas, or maybe more accurately, as a way to provide more time to manage any chance finds of archaeologically sensitive objects that are found during that excavation. So done just with a single excavator, a monitor, and some flag people, rather than with the whole trench and cover operation behind it, with the thought that it's a lot easier to stop and follow the proper process in the event of a chance find. So that brings us through to the east side of KFN IR1, and then that short orange section is intended to be a swath. So just highlighting that the precise alignment of the horizontal directional drilled section through that area is not pinpointed yet. And so that, although it is a fairly tight band under which it would run. And so that would start at the Comox Hill and end at the east side of the St. Joe's Hospital property. So from there, we would have a cut and cover section all the way through Comox. And as discussed earlier, there is still some uncertainty over one part of that alignment, and that's the first part from St. Joe's over to Ellis, whether we run along Beaufort or Comox. From Ellis and Beaufort, though, we've had a long since agreed upon route, which would flow along Beaufort, up Stewart, along Balmoral to the intersection of Balmoral and Torrance. And then that's the start of another of the orange swath area that was shown on the previous slide, and that's the potential area under which the HDD alignment could run under Comox Hill. And just a reminder, these horizontal directional drilled or tunneled sections are being installed to keep the maximum elevation of the this route as low as possible, to minimize the pressure requirements, the head requirements, and over the long term energy costs, and then risks at the pump stations. The higher the force main pressures, the higher the risk at each of the pump stations. And so, and finally, at the far east end, connection of the new line to the plant. So that's the description of the recommended option in a nutshell. And there's no way around it. There's no doubt this is an expensive project. It will require significant effort from the CVRD and municipal staff, who will be working closely with to deliver the project. And it will have major impacts to the public in terms of traffic impacts. But we're ready for this internally. We're committed to optimizing the project scope as we progress through this year, working with municipal staff and our engineers, and working with the public to minimize the impact to the community. So after the extensive public and technical process that Christiane and I have summarized to you today, the CVRD and municipal staff strongly believe that this option, the recommended option, represents the the most cost-effective and lowest risk option for long-term conveyance of wastewater from our two largest pump stations to the treatment plant. And certainly the best and fastest way to decommission the Willimer Bluffs section of force main and resolve that environmental risk. So should the commission support this motion today, the meeting will signal the start of the shift from the planning to implementation. And the next time we would be bringing forward the project back to the commission would be roughly this fall when we would bring forward kind of the final scope for approval before locking it into the procurement document. And any changes would be minimal with an eye to minimizing impact to the public and the risk and cost to the service. Yeah, so that's it from me. So before I hand you over to Charlie to update you on the project costs and the anticipated project schedule, are there any burning questions that I can speak to?
Thanks, Chris. We do have a director Hamir, I believe, related to the last slide to do with wells in Area B.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thanks for allowing me to ask the questions today. I did have two questions, if that's okay. The first one was actually more to do with, this was a comment that was brought up in the LWMP around the laydown area for tunneling and how it might impact both Comox and Area B residents. And I didn't see any reference to that in the report because I know there was potentially some disturbance going to happen, close to the golf course. Has that changed, or have staff sort of rethought that, or where is that at?
So the concept brought forward last fall was to have the laydown for that horizontal directional drilled section through Lazo Hill to stretch along Balmoral, past Stewart, past the mall, and into the golf course. So we're still closely considering that option. The value engineering process has suggested some possible alternatives that we're just in the process of working through with our engineering consultants. But any decision to modify that laydown area will be made based on those criteria that I mentioned, just in terms of minimizing impacts to the public and cost and risk to the service.
Okay, thanks. So, I mean, it doesn't sound like that has changed. So that's just something I should know when conveying to constituents. The second one was, yes, it did have to do with the well slide. If you could back up one slide. My only concern was I was noticing that, not all the properties show wells, especially like right along the route. And I'm wondering how accurate this is. I know it is from, you probably have this from whatever government database, but could it be missing dug wells or older wells, pre-registration? And if that is the case, how might that impact the route or going forward?
Yes, so that's forgive me, I meant to mention the fact that the driver for that inventory is exactly that we've clearly identified that there are a number of projects here, the properties here that don't have a well registered in the provincial database, and so the blue dots on this map represent those wells that are registered. So for those wells, we still need to get onto each property and precisely measure the location and depth, because we from what we understand, the information within the registry is not always completely accurate. And then obviously we need to identify any missing wells and also map their precise location and depth. So our objective here is to have a comprehensive inventory of all wells that overlap with this orange polygon. And so a couple of weeks ago, the local residents there received a letter asking them, telling them about updating them on the project and asking for their permission to provide their contact information to our hydrological consultant so that they can reach out and undertake that inventory. So we're in the process of hearing back from the residents on that topic, and working closely with each of them to explain why it's so important that we map their wells, because as you've highlighted, we really need to know where every single well is, to avoid a situation where we come too close to an existing unregistered well, and somehow compromise that drinking water source. So yeah, so that process is very much underway. We're hearing back from many of the residents, and just planning our next step for those residents who don't respond, and then working directly with those that are in any way reluctant to provide that approval.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you, Director Swift.
Thanks. Thanks, Chris. I guess when I first read this report, I was a little dismayed or / horrified, because we spent several $1 million not that long ago, 3-4 years ago, to make sure about the condition of the pipes, both along Willamar Bluffs and the estuary. And at that time, it was determined that infrastructure was good for 15 to 20 years along the estuary. So I'm just wondering, can you help me understand how we got from 15 to 20 years to we're on the verge of a catastrophic failure in that range of time?
Sure. So I guess first of all, I'll just point out that the condition assessment that was completed in 2017 was done for the entire alignment. Maybe Lisa, can you forward to the next slide? Thank you. Yeah, so that condition assessment was completed on the entire length of the existing forest main, and it was on the order of $450,000 total cost, not several million. And the results indicated that the pipe was generally in good condition for its age. So the 15 to 20 years came from looking at the expected lifespan of this type of pipe, which is 55 to 60 years, and the current age. So that's where the expected remaining lifespan came from. So earlier on in the liquid waste management planning process, we had not flagged this line for continued use. We felt that based on the assessment to date, that the elevated pressure that the pipe would be exposed to from shifting the forest main up and over Lazo Hill was likely to be, unacceptable, an unacceptable pressure increase for the existing pipe. It wasn't. That being said, we were committed, dedicated to finding the most cost-effective approach here. So partway through the planning process, I think it was last year, while we took the opportunity that COVID-19 provided to, in terms of the delay to the public engagement process, it gave us more time to undertake some additional assessment, and we explored the concept of actually continuing to use that pipe. Until then, the phased approach wasn't existing. So working with WSP last year, they concluded that the pressure increase from the tunneled option, so this one here, would only double the working pressure in that pipe and still keep it well below its rated pressure limit. So we worked extensively with WSP, and as a result, we brought the concept of phasing forward. Unfortunately, as I explained earlier, when we brought the value engineering team in, so this is a separate group of third-party experts, including one expert with a career of experience on this type of concrete or steel reinforced concrete pipe. And I've just presented his views, which were at odds with WSP's, which have consequently kind of forced us to take that one back off the table. So hopefully that provides some of the background to the question. I think, the reality is we have to do the best that we have with the information we have now, which, in our view is of significantly higher quality than the assessment provided by WSP last year that led us to kind of suggest a phased approach in the first place.
Yeah, and I guess this has been the story of the Sewage Commission, though. We make these decisions based on the information we have at the time, and then often we found that it's not quite right. So that's a bit of a concern when you're going forward with such a big project. I guess, and the other question I had was just a clarification on the siting of Courtney Pump Station. Where would it be? In the same location?
So, yeah, so it'll be roughly in the same location. So we'll be walking through a siting process, looking at identifying what options there are in the immediate vicinity of the existing station. So very, very close to it. So we'll walk through that process over the coming months, and that will be that could be a contact point between the project and the commission as well. But certainly, if not before, then certainly when we bring forward that kind of final scope of the project this fall.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Chris, my question is about the pre-dig process and whether KFN, I guess I'm wondering if there was a significant find there, how that would impact the project. I know my husband was in construction and found human remains on a site, and it delayed the project by several months. And I guess I'm also wondering about KFN's capacity to deal with something like that. I'm wondering if any of those conversations have taken place and what the process would be if there was quite a significant archaeological find there, and how that would impact things.
Yeah, so I guess that you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's exactly why we're intent, or that the concept of pre-digging came up during negotiation of the CBA. I think it just makes sense on so many levels. It allows us to respect the KFN's capacity, the KFN's history, the KFN's relevant newly implemented policy, and to do so in an environment that has far less pressure. If we were to make that type of encounter with an archaeologically sensitive artifact, or say a body, with the entire machine of a major trench and cover operation behind it, there would be major cost impacts to the project. There would be pressure, inadvertent, unintended, but pressure on the KFN and others to expedite process. So by pre-digging, we take that pressure off. We hope to schedule that well in advance of the start of construction, so that we are able to take the required time in order to be respectful and compliant with the KFN's cultural heritage policy. So I think that in short, the pre-digging will allow us to take that the necessary time.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do note the text at the bottom right of the slide that references the Indigenous people's history in the area and the significance of their sites. Director Minions.
Thanks, Chris, for the presentation so far. I think there's been an explanation on why option 2 is the best option to move forward and why an AAP is so important on the timeline. But kind of looking at the information that's being given today, how looking at a fair and responsible kind of option for our town of Comox residents and businesses. If the AAP does go forward today and we do a design build in the town of Comox portion, what is kind of the, I don't want to say the word guarantee, but if the route is changed through that design build and it doesn't work for businesses, what is the flexibility there on making sure we get a route that is satisfactory? And also looking at the 58 million plus 35%, I'm not sure if there's a breakdown of what is set aside for We talked about whether it's cut and cover, whether it's a full bike lane, et cetera. So just some clarity on how flexible the route is and what is the planned kind of amenity contribution for the portion through Comox.
Mr. Chair, maybe if I could ask Chris to answer the first question with respect to design build and that. And then I think your second part of the question will probably be answered or with the assistance of some of the slides that are to come. But Chris, could you address that first one?
Sure. Yes. So we're in, I guess, sorry, so specifically the question of locking down the alignment. Regardless of how the cut and cover component through the town is delivered, the intention is to fully lock down the precise alignment before the competitive process. So regardless of whether it's delivered as a design bid build or a design build, the precise alignment will be nailed down with as much detail as possible. So there won't be a situation where the alignment gets changed partway through that process. Maybe just a quick comment on the project delivery method and some of the concerns from the town of Comox regarding the how it's delivered. So we're committed to working closely with town staff and city staff who are participating in those discussions to reach consensus on how that the project is delivered through the town. So just to put your mind at ease, I think we'll be working intensively over the coming weeks to advance the design of the alignment through the town, kind of finalize the analysis required to inform a decision about Comox Road versus Beaufort, and then work together at the staff level before bringing forward a recommendation regarding how to deliver the project through the town. As Russell mentioned, Charlie is going to get into project costs over the coming slides, so he'd be better placed to answer that question.
Okay, any further questions for Chris at this stage? Director Grant?
Well, maybe I'll wait for Charlie. My question was, with the 73 million, can you tell us what's included in that? Does that include conveyancing, treatment, pump stations? We're just trying to get it might be Charlie's thing, but I'm just trying to get an indication of what the impact to our taxpayers is actually going to be.
So perhaps we can move along to Charlie's presentation and fully address that.
Both Charlie and Mariah will address the impacts and the breakdown. Here it is.
Thanks. Charlie, over to you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Fantastic.
So as Chris has detailed, a lot of work has happened since we went out to the public with the LWMP estimates for each option. And what you can see up here on the screen is the latest cost estimate. This includes the pump stations, and there's 3 of them, the cut and cover section, which is all the open trench work for the project, and the trenchless portions, which is the horizontal directional drilling that Chris took us through. So you can see here that the cut and cover portion of the project is half of the project budget. It is the longest portion of the project at over 5.5 kilometers of pipe. And the other portions of the cost estimate are really indicative of where we're at in the process. The midpoint of construction is not expected to be until 2023, and therefore, as per best practice, we need to account for the increase in construction costs that will happen between now and that time. We're accounting for 15% of the capital costs for the engineering for the project, which will cover both the owner's engineer and the detail designer. We know that there's going to be some detail costs that will come in from the land side of things. As we negotiate right-of-ways with private landowners, we need to account for for the legal and land title costs that come along with that. And as well, the contingency. We're carrying a 35% contingency for those capital costs because we are only at a preliminary design right now. And as per industry best practice, as we do on all of our projects, we are carrying the corresponding level of contingency to make sure that as we further detail this project, as more of the unknowns become known, we have the budget there to be able to account for those unknowns and move forward with this estimate that we're confident that we can complete the project under. So I have some slides coming up that will explain the changes that have come about from our original estimate that we communicated summer last year to the LWMP group. But would anyone like to? Okay, I'll move forward with this, and we can go to questions at the end. So what's changed with regards to the cost estimate? Chris talked you through the seismic results, which have really changed the scope for the Courtenay pump station, gone from a mere retrofit to having to build a new pump station. That has been a big increase on the costs. The escalation to midpoints of construction, again, is cost that we need to add to our estimate as to ensure that we have the money available once we finally get to the building part of the project. Optimizing that contingency, ensuring that we have the correct amount of money to account for the unknowns, and also flood proofing both the Jane Place pump station in Comox and the Courtenay pump station to provide for the climate change resiliency that we've been building into all of our infrastructure projects, whether it's the water treatment project or these large sewer projects, because the lifespan for these projects is 80 to 100 years. We need to account for the changes in our landscape and climate that will be coming along with that. I know that the increase from what was communicated as a $58 million project back last summer to a 73 seems significant. And that is the result of this huge body of work that's happened in the meantime. And I do want to reinforce that those changes also apply to the other options. Option one, which was highlighted as a more expensive option then, is also a more expensive option now. And those costs, if you apply the same changes, would escalate to $83 million. Next slide, please. So from a timeline perspective, this is the timeline that we believe that we can execute the project. So we have these two major decisions coming up over the next month. The decision today on the conveyance, as well as the planned decision in early March regarding the implementation strategy. Chris noted the detailed discussions that are going on with the town of Comox right now regarding the route through the town and how the restoration of those roads will work. We need to get out to the public and get an owner's engineer on board so that we can start so that we can finalize that scope, negotiate with the correct property owners, and establish the hydrological baseline to ensure that we can protect people's groundwater wells, and then go out early next year to get a contractor on board so that we can get construction going by the end of next year. It is an aggressive timeline. We are pushing this project to meet the Sewage Commission's intent of decommissioning the Willamar Bluffs as soon as possible. So that's my update on the cost and the schedule. Very happy to answer some of your questions at this time.
Thank you, Charlie. Questions for Charlie? Director Minions.
Just a really quick question. With a life timeline of 80 to 100 years, is 30 years the max amortization that is allowed on that debt, which I believe I've heard it is, but just confirming that.
Yes, I can answer that. It is, and Mariah will get into the financial strategy as well on that. Thank you.
Charlie, just to clarify, the owner's engineer, that's, so we have an engineer who represents property owners impacted by the project?
Yeah, yes, the owner's engineer would represent a CBRD and all of our partners on our side of the project. So that they are on our team, and an owner's engineer is generally when you go down the route of a design build, but they represent our interests in the design as you move through the phases of the project through to commissioning.
But do property owners impacted by the project have reference to that engineer?
They would have reference through us. So any concerns that came up from any landowners in our discussions with them, we would have that owner's engineer on our team to be able to do the necessary work to resolve their concerns.
Thanks. Director Grant.
Yeah, so now is it Mariah I should talk to about my question, or is it Charlie about, so if I'm looking at this correctly, option 2 is 210 on the average house. Now, if we add treatment to that, do we know what the treatment portion of that is?
Charlie, do you have that, or do you want to save that for Mariah?
Mariah's texting me saying she's dying to get at this. So
Okay, I'll wait for you. I'm just, yeah, I'm getting to that age where I can't remember all the sequence anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Do we have any further questions for Charlie? Seeing none, we can move along. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
Mariah's next. Mariah, you have us, you have our rapt attention.
Perfect. Ready to go here. I think a lot of what I'll cover here will cover a lot of the questions you've had so far. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay,
Thanks.
perfect. So with the updated cost estimate for this project of the 73 million, we've taken a really wholesome look at this project, but also the overall capital plan for this service. So really looking actually out to the 10 to 15 year mark. Knowing that, you know, this is a major upgrade, but we also have treatment plan upgrades we have to complete, as well as in the long range, a marine outfall replacement or upgrades. So we've really tried to look holistically at this project and its funding strategy, as well as over the long term and making sure we have a sustainable regional service. And also a lot of collaboration with the member municipality CFOs and partners, because knowing that essentially our requisition, our funding strategy, and then our related requisition impacts flow over to the member municipalities and their user fee bylaws. So really being mindful of what we determine as a funding strategy and how we affect our requisition really affects, you know, your particular user fee bylaws. And also being mindful of, you know, the main conveyance and treatment plant upgrades are, you know, a core foundational piece of the regional system, but also knowing that the Comox and Courtenay have upgrades in their pipes and systems and operations to run. So really looking holistically at this, and we've had some really, really great collaboration with our partners over this strategy and making sure we're setting up a good service today and in the long term for the whole Comox Valley region. So I'll just sort of give that overview. And then through that, we essentially have determined a funding strategy for this project of $21 million of reserves and $52 million of borrowing. And essentially that recognition that using a mix of reserves and debt ensures that both current and future taxpayers fund investment. So being mindful, we've had really good discussions about the debt year term that we look at for this project. You know, typically we look at sort of a 20 to 25 year debt term. But with this project, given the size and scope of it, being so significant, but also to just the service life. You know, this is quite an integral piece to the system that we expect to provide service life over 80 years. And so looking at that longer term, you know, provides that recognition that we want to make sure we don't sort of have, you know, significant increases today to our ratepayers. And then, you know, not, you know, they're front loading all of the costs, where also this, you know, pipe will provide that long service life. So that's where that mix of reserves and debt in the longer term kind of recognizes that and make sure that everybody pays a portion of that investment. So that's what we've proposed to you. This essentially provides an average 5.5% requisition increase over the 5-year plan. So that is in line with what we've previously proposed or presented to the Courtenay Comox and the requisition levels for the first 3 years. And actually through this kind of holistic funding strategy, we've actually moderated the rates in the long term. So Previously, we had in 2024 a 9.3% increase with this project, and now we've moderated that out to the sort of that 5.5% level. And then also like long term, as I mentioned, we really looked at kind of balancing the use of reserves and debt over the 10 to 15-year plan. And so this essentially tapers off after the 5 years and goes to more of an inflationary level. And what was recognized from the member municipalities is this allows them to plan ahead, integrate this into their user fee bylaws, and ensure there's funding left to maintain their operational and capital systems, you know, being mindful of what is palatable for the taxpayers and the ratepayers in the region. You know, with these heavy infrastructure services, I think there's sort of a recognition, you know, that there's, you know, through an investment period, there's going to be increases over and above that kind of standard inflationary figure, but also to just, you know, being mindful of what taxpayers can bear, particularly in this sort of COVID recovery time. So I think overall we had some really good comfort on this kind of holistic funding strategy. And what this provided was an estimated cost per household of $150 annually for this particular project and for this particular AEP. So again, we really did look at this with our member municipality partners because, you know, we essentially flow that requisition increase to your member municipalities and your bylaws. So really determining what's an appropriate rate calculation. So this is 150 annually, and this is slightly different than what was proposed for option 2 in the fall, which was 210. And the difference is because at that point it was 58 million over a 20-year term of fully debt funded, and this updated strategy considers both reserves and debt and that longer debt term of 30 years. So that's what we've proposed for this project, and I'm happy to answer any questions on this.
Thank you, Mariah. And we have Director Swift.
Thanks, Mariah. Just a clarification, probably. The $150 is a per household, not based on assessment, correct?
Correct.
Right. But this is not including the treatment option, is it? So that would be another 121, I think it was, on top of that.
Well, what we've looked at, you know, this particular AEP, we're determining the debt servicing over the approximate number of folios within the Comox Valley and Courtenay. That's essentially where we've determined that figure. And that's kind of a high level, you know, a conservative estimate essentially of what the impact of this particular project is. And that's essentially driving that 5.5% requisition increase over the 5 years. And then when we look in the long term, which considers the treatment plan upgrades as well as the marine outfall, the requisition staggers out to sort of 2 to 2.5% thereafter with those projects funded. So we're really trying to maximize, you know, the debt funding and the reserves that we have. So we're sort of front loading the debt on this service for this project because it's coming up quickly and it's quite significant, and also that long life. And then thereafter, we're really trying to maximize the reserve contributions and those kind of annual smooth contributions as well as expected DCC revenues. And then it sort of smooths itself out. So, you know, what we're sort of saying is this project and the expected impacts are sort of moderated through the plan. So we don't expect to see significant year-over-year increases at this high level ongoing.
Yes, but I guess by my calculations, though, per household is going to be about $271, not $150. Or does the treatment option stagger in at some other point? I guess maybe that's what I'm not sure about.
So do you mean the treatment plant upgrades that are coming in the plan thereafter, after the conveyance pipe?
Okay, so I guess that's my question, maybe, is the conveyance will be done prior to increasing any upgrades at the plant for treatment?
Yes, that's correct. So when we've looked at our long range plan, we have this conveyance project, which is $73 million, and that's planned to occur between 2021 to 2023. And then we have the first phase of the water treatment upgrades, or wastewater treatment upgrades, sorry, through 2024-25 at around that sort of $9.7 million. Okay. And that's funded by reserves and a little bit of debt. And then looking long term, we have sort of second phase of the treatment plant upgrades in 2029 at $9 million. And that we expect at that point to have accumulated enough reserves and DCCs to fund fully through reserves versus using debt.
Okay, great. That wasn't my understanding, so I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Glad we could make you happy, Director Swift. Do we have further questions for Mariah? Looks like not at this point. So next, are we back to Chris? James, sorry, James.
Thanks, Chair Hillian. And can you hear me okay, Chair Hillian?
Yes, thanks, James.
Okay, so thanks for this opportunity. This is the last slide of our presentation. As noted, funding strategy for the conveyance project includes using funds from reserves and borrowing. CVRD must use a loan authorization bylaw to borrow the funds, and for that we need to obtain elector approval. In some cases, a waste management plan that is authorized by the provincial government can authorize that borrowing. However, taking our current LWMP through to provincial approval could take between 2 and 3 years additionally from today, as noted here on the slide. As time goes on, the risk to the environment continues to increase should the current conveyance line fail. So at this point, staff are recommending that the conveyance portion of the LWMP be pulled out and funded separately. As Mariah noted, staff are recommending that the project be funded by reserves and $52 million in borrowed funds. And to seek elector approval for the loan authorization bylaw, we are also recommending that an AAP be used. Staff recognizes that some concerns exist in the community around AAPs in general, but also that the amount we are proposing to borrow is a very large sum of money. Staff have also spent considerable time evaluating the pros and cons of using an AAP. The staff report describes those pros and cons in more detail. However, to summarize, for projects affecting public and environmental health, and where extensive engagement has introduced the project to the community, as is the case for this project, an AAP is suitable. Further, the work done to assess options and engage with public and technical audiences helps to lay the groundwork to use the AAP. And of course, the AAP is a gauge where if more than 10% of voters submit response forms, the Sewage Commission and Board could opt to move ahead with a referendum or revert to following through with the conveyance in the LWMP itself. Should the Sewage Commission support today's recommendation to use the AAP, the AAP will be combined with a few other alternative approval processes that the CVRD is conducting this spring. The goal here is to provide clear information about this project and AAPs in general, and simplify the materials that the public receives. Timing would see a press release and legal advertisements in mid to late May, and the response forms being submitted through June. A report on the logistics for the AAP, as well as an implementation strategy and overall project schedule, would be presented to the Sewage Commission at your next meeting on March 9th. And Mr. Chair, that is it for my comments on the slide. Happy to take any questions here or on the presentation overall.
Thanks very much, James. I'm a little concerned about the lack of snow on the glacier in your slide there, but we'll save that for another day. Questions regarding the alternate approval process proposed? Director Grant.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't have any problem with the alternate approval process because I think that we really have no choice but to do it this way, and it's probably the safest way to move forward. We do in town, though, have some concerns over final routing and infrastructure replacement and what standards that's going to be done to and how much impact there's going to be to our community. And so I think if I heard you correctly, you said that this AAP would be wrapped into some other ones that wouldn't start till, did you say May? Or did I hear you wrong there?
Yeah, no, thanks, Director Grant. So with the two things there, with loan authorization bylaws, we must submit those after the board gives 3 readings to the bylaw. We must submit them to the Inspector of Municipalities and the inspector for approval before we can go to the public to legally advertise and then receive the response forms. And that process with the inspector takes up to 8 weeks. So it is a 3-month-long process, if not a bit more, from the time the board gives readings to the loan authorization bylaw to the time where the results would be returned to the board. So looking ahead, you're right, we would be presenting our legal notices to the public in mid to late May.
Okay, well, you know, we'd like to have more discussion around some of these things probably before we approve an AAP. And I'm just trying to wonder if we've got enough time to do that with the concerns that we have. There's a lot of questions that I think our community still needs to hear the answer to. And so I guess the next question is there any rush to do is it an AAP or an APP? AAP. If we were to delay it, would that cause significant issues? And if so, can we sit down and have some really meaningful discussions over some of the issues that we want to resolve? And I don't think there's any showstoppers there. We just need to know, you know, how we're going to move forward.
The staff and project team have really advanced this project in consideration of the due direction provided by the Sewage Commission and the importance that the Sewage Commission has put on the implementation of this project to resolve the Comox Bluffs, Wilmore Bluffs, issue. It has been a long and extensive process that has got us today with a ton of analysis and information presented to you for you to feel confident in moving forward. It is staff's recommendation that you do give us the direction to proceed to prepare for an AAP today, and that is the resolution here. That's not to say that if you're not confident before the board considers the first initial readings to those bylaws that you couldn't at that time delay it a little bit further or adjust the timeline. But in order for us to advance this project and see it implemented in a timely fashion, we are seeking your direction to proceed to prepare for the AAP. In the meantime, staff are working with the staff of the town of Comox and the city of Courtenay to really advance the knowledge and understanding of the alignment and how that may impact the town of Comox. I want to assure you that our project team is well aware of the impacts this will have to your community in terms of your infrastructure, in terms of the advancements and improvements you want to make to your streets and how those schedules might be affected by this project, as well as the tremendous impact it will have to your residents as the project proceeds. I think that over the next couple of months, you will see us advance the knowledge and understanding of the project. We hear you today that you are concerned about Comox Road and the impact it may have on your community. So perhaps a further analysis as to the alternative of Beaufort being considered will be important information for your staff to consider. So I can assure you that we will advance those discussions. We will present more information for your staff to be confident that we will arrive at a place where the town of Comox concerns can be addressed. What I would really encourage is, at the very least, we work on principles. We may not have the detailed design at this time because it is an extremely expensive, long, prolonged process to get there. But working together, staff to staff, Sewage Commission to Council, we can agree on the principles that will apply under any circumstance in which that pipeline is located in the middle, the side, or in the sidewalk of your streets, and how the Sewage Commission will ensure that the construction of that project is in the interests and has the least amount of disruption to the town of Comox. I think that we are very close. I encourage you to adopt the resolutions or recommendations that you have before you today, and I give you my assurance that we will continue to work with your staff to resolve the matters in terms of the impacts that this will have to the town of Comox.
So if I may, am I still in line?
Go ahead, Director.
So just in knowing that we're not going until May with this, I don't really have a big problem with following through with the AAP. I would like to add another part to the motion that just says that when we get to that point, that further discussion take place with the town of Comox regarding the final route, infrastructure replacement standards, and community impacts. And I think it's actually what you just said, but we would feel more comfortable if that were a part of this. So when the time comes, I would ask to add that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, a separate resolution to provide that direction from staff, and that's a position of the Sewage Commission, will be very valuable to us.
Thank you for clarifying. Are there further questions or comments at this point before we dispense with receipt? All right. We have Director Swift.
Thank you. If this is out of order, you can just we'll set it aside. But I guess I've sat on this commission for about 10 years, and we've gone down this road many, many times. And sometimes we've had the wrong information or not enough information. But you know, we're getting really close here, and we only have one chance to do it, so we need to do it right. Are there any possible showstoppers in this, in terms of either inability to tunnel through the hills or problems with those aquifers and wells? And if so, do we have a plan B?
Chris?
Well, I mean, in answer to your question, a plan B, I mean, as has been summarized to you today, our focus has been on doing the highest level of due diligence possible. Not only for the recommended option, but, you know, in first identifying, you know, all possible options, providing in-depth analysis of each, and walking through all of the key stakeholders on those, including, you know, some of the stakeholders that might be involved in the risk that you mentioned. And then finally, once that was selected, you know, undertaking significant value engineering exercise. So we've included that robust third-party review of the process. So we've done, I guess, a long story short, we've done a lot to mitigate. We've done everything possible to mitigate those risks, and we will continue to work through those, including, you know, as has been highlighted, the in-depth consultation with the town to ensure that you know, that everybody is on the same page and happy with the approach before committing to a procurement process. You know, in terms of the area B risk that you mentioned to groundwater wells, you know, we've worked extensively with the property agent and people that have been involved in previous processes in securing SRWs for tunnel alignments. So we believe we know exactly what's involved. None of these individuals have raised flags about the process. You know, we're trying to follow as robust an engagement process as possible with the residents in that area, doing everything we can to hear and address their concerns. The hydrological work to establish the baseline, to ensure that we have got every single well nailed down. I think, you know, we are doing everything we can to anticipate, identify, and mitigate risk to this approach. At the end of the day, we've included significant contingencies, appropriate levels of contingencies for those, you know, higher risk components of the project. So I think we're in a really good shape. I mean, long story short. But to answer your question, a plan B, and we haven't identified, you know, one single risk to the project alignment, to the project itself, that raises the prospect of a failed process. You know, each of the risks identified, you know, that will continue to be assessed, you know, come with cost premiums, which we think will be addressed in the contingencies that are set for the project. You're not raising the prospect of a failed process.
Okay, that's great. And I guess if I could just ask one more question, given the condition with the estuary and the anticipation of a catastrophic failure, wouldn't this move us up the ladder in any sort of way for disaster mitigation application?
Yeah, we've definitely, you know, the question has come up before. We've been carefully poring over the program details for, you know, for available funding opportunities. You know, with that in mind, in addition to the typical kind of catchphrases or words that we look for, you know, for wastewater and water funding. And to date, nothing has risen to the top, but we will continue to be, you know, exploring any and all opportunities for funding. I think there is a motion on your staff report today to, you know, directing staff to do exactly that, to continue doing that and to apply for any potential source of funding. we certainly haven't given up hope that that the project will be able to attract funding. But the approach now is to structure the funding, the funding model, the funding approach, assuming no significant grant funding, but to put all our effort into finding possible sources of grants, which would then just improve the financial snapshot for our municipalities and residents.
Thank you, Chris. Director Minions.
Thank you. This might be going a little micro, but I feel compelled to asking before we get to the motions. I was looking at that map of the looked like 16 properties along Lazo approximately that would affect. And I was visiting a friend yesterday. He's in his mid-70s. He's an artist. He's got an artist studio on his property, and he happened to take me to his well water shed, and he was showing me around. Anyway, it's the closest dot to the line there. And before kind of making the AAP go through as my vote there, it sounds like the well water is the biggest risk to those properties, but just so I understand, that would not be impacting actual like ground level living residences and that's not something that we would be looking at, by force on property, just to understand. It's obviously going to affect those 16 residents, but I'm specifically thinking of a person I happened to visit yesterday that looks like the line is going to go right through his well water. So not displacement of actual housing is not something we're looking at.
Correct.
Clarification, please.
There are several steps in the process to get at a final alignment, and one of which will be confirming that we have all the detailed information with respect to the wells, and that's, as Chris explained, we'll be undertaking that work so that can inform the location of it. And then in order to undertake the directional drilling underneath any of those properties, a right-of-way agreement will have to be struck with those particular individuals or property owners. So all the issues can be resolved and will need to be resolved before the project takes place and impacts any of the individual properties.
Okay, so just for clarification, it's not affecting the actual treescape. It's not affecting the land. Everything is very underneath ground.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Director Cole Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, I was wondering if I could just get a bit more detail on the engineering, the more recent engineering assessment on the pipe that goes along Comox Road. This is obviously new since the TACPAK concluded. Is there a kind of more specific assessment of the risk, like what the percentage likelihood of failure per year is on that particular? And I recognize the risk is catastrophic rather than leak, which makes any risk much more substantial. But is it this sort of a comparable timeline to what we're seeing for the Willamar Bluffs for in terms of the integrity of that pipe?
The reality is we don't we haven't done that level of of risk assessment, that a detailed risk assessment that was done for the Willamar Bluff section. So just to sum up what we have done, we've got a condition assessment for the entire length. And that's the one that I refreshed you on earlier. And then in addition to that, we did a separate study, so a risk assessment of the Willamar Bluff section of force main by Northwest Hydraulics. And that was also done in 2017. And that was specifically looking at the reality that the depth of cover is falling on that beach, and that there's, we've of the roughly just over 2 kilometers section, 300 meters of that has been covered in gabion baskets because of the fact that it was either uncovered or almost uncovered. And then we continue to do a depth of cover survey biannually, where we have a surveyor walk over the length of the pipe and measure the depth of cover. And we are plotting declining cover in a number of locations with, some areas with less than a foot of gravel above it. So we've got detailed risk assessment and ongoing monitoring along that section. We have no reason to believe that there is a depth of cover issue on the rest of the pipe. So that explains why we haven't done that same level of risk assessment. So the risk assessment for the Willamar Bluff section had highlighted some extremely high risks or probability of failure, that are, just next level, like talking about 50% chance of failure. If we let any part of that pipe get uncovered, there's a 50% chance of failure within a several year period, which in engineering terms is horrifying. You would replace a pipe with a far lower chance of failure, given what's at stake here for the community, for the local marine environment. So you really can't compare them. But in terms of no, the recent work by SVS and the third party expert hired from the pipeline perspective, what they looked at and said that the condition assessment work done to date, in their view, wasn't sufficient, that there needs to be additional assessment done using different complementary technologies that would provide a more comprehensive look at the condition. So without taking that additional step, it's hard to kind of respond directly to the chance of failure. But the reality is that what we're talking about, what we were considering there is whether or not to continue using the pipe for its remaining third of its life.
Yeah.
Right. So as that pipe approaches its end of life, so 10, 15, 20 years, 20 is almost getting beyond its end of expected life. That pipe, the risk of failure will increase as that pipe ages. So it's a different situation from Wilmer Bluffs because it doesn't have that that depth of cover and the uncovering issue, but it's more a matter of the age and the costs of doing that extra condition assessment and that real-time monitoring and restoration of the corrosion protection system. Now that adds up to $4-5 million, which just happens to be roughly what we would be saving by continuing to use that pipe. That pipe, that section of pipe, has according to the latest cost estimates that Charlie summarized today, has a cost of around, say, $18 million. And if the lifespan is 80 years, let's say it's 20 million, lifespan of 80 years. If you delay the installation of that pipe by 20, you're looking at a quarter of its lifespan, or roughly $5 million. So it comes out of as a wash. Plus, we have to handle the risk and manage the risk of that pipe for the last fraction of its lifespan. So that's a really high level summary of our assessment. It doesn't seem to make financial sense to spend as much as we would save and still have the risk of that risk hanging over the whole service's head of that prospect of catastrophic failure.
Thank you, Chris. Can I ask a very quick follow-up, Chair?
Go ahead.
So, would the correct understanding be that it's not at quite such an imminent risk of catastrophic failure as the Willamar Bluffs line, but it's not anywhere near serviceable for the length of time that was considered by the TACPAK when they were looking at option 3. So it's not something that we need to be worrying about like next week or next year, but it's simply not likely in a condition to put in the several decades of service we'd contemplated with option 3. Is that roughly is that an appropriate characterization?
Yeah, I'd say that's a good characterization, Director. We don't believe this pipe is in imminent risk of failure, but as it ages, regardless of this additional due diligence that we would otherwise do on the pipe, that risk of failure increases. So yeah, we're not afraid for it right now. We do have that recent condition assessment, but when you start looking out 5-10 years, the level of expense that would be required to maintain our comfort with that pipe is pushed us.
Thank you, Chris.
Away from continuing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one question that I'll ask, and I'll make this, I think, the final before we move on. And that's regarding the timing of the approval process and the detailed design. It's indicated, I think, in the report that the detailed design would follow. And I just want to clarify how long that process is and how we intend to mitigate any risks of unforeseen costs that arise through that process.
I'll ask Charlie to speak to that one.
Thanks, Charlie. Do we still have you?
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Just taking my phone off mic. Yeah, the importance to move forward on the detailed design as soon as possible is driven by the urgency to get the project done, and as we wait longer and longer to do projects, the escalation costs for those projects go up. So we, as per the schedule that I presented, our intent is to get direction from the Sewage Commission on both the conveyance decision today and the implementation strategy in early March, and get going on that detailed design as soon as possible.
And how long does that process take? The detailed design?
It depends on the implementation strategy taken. There's been some discussion today with directors from the town of Comox regarding discussion of whether we're going to go design build for the entire project or design bid build for a portion through the town, which affects design timelines. If we do go a design build, we would do the indicative design and preparation of the statement of requirements this year and go out for procurement of the design build early next year. If we alternately do a detailed design, which would lead towards a design bid build where we would go out just for a contractor, that detailed design would start this year and flow into next year. And so that detailed design would be happening from middle of this year through to middle of next year.
Okay, and we believe the contingency that's built into the financing is adequate to cover any potential increases that arise through the design detail.
That is our belief. Yes, the engineering best practices have quite specific levels of engineering contingency that they recommend applied to different levels of design, and we have done that with this project. And I think through the infrastructure program that we've been delivering over the last 5 years, we've showed time and time again that we can deliver projects on budget and on schedule, including the $126 million water treatment project that's ongoing. So I think that we have a good track record with our estimates, and we're confident with this one as well.
Thanks very much. All right, we are on receipt. Is there anyone who objects to receipt? Seeing and hearing none, the motion to receive is passed. And we move on to recommendations.
I'll move recommendation 1 with a third and further, if I may, that would say, and further discussion take place with the town of Comox regarding the final route, infrastructure replacement standards, and community impact.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Any comment from staff regarding the suggested addition? All right, so we'll call the question on the motion. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing and hearing none, recommendation 1 is passed. Recommendation 2.
Move 2.
Second.
Moved by Director Grant, seconded by Cole Hamilton. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, we'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to recommendation number 2? Seeing and hearing none, recommendation 2 passes. Recommendation number 3.
Move 3.
Moved by Director Grant.
Second.
Seconded by Director Minions. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, we'll call the question. Is anyone opposed? No one indicates being opposed. Recommendation number 3 is passed. We have
Termination.
Second.
Business. I believe Director Grant has moved termination and Director Cole Hamilton has seconded. All in favor? Carried. The meeting is terminated with great thanks to all the staff members who presented and all the commission members who took part and a very significant meeting today. Thanks very much.